House of the Dragon took a lot of either brave or bizarre decisions in its first season, depending on who you ask. The massive time jumps, changing actresses for your main character mid-season, treating the show not exactly like a traditional fiction narrative, but more like a stylized biography that really resembled The Crown than the original Game of Thrones. All of that made House of the Dragon feel a bit uneasy and slow with its story and character, but then again, it is a series that runs in the bloody and mysterious world of Westeros, so it was compelling because you had no idea of what the next episode was going to be about, at least for the people who haven't read the books, that is. For me, in the beginning, the show left a lot to be desired. There were no great battles or scenes with a lot of tension, all the things we come to love from Game of Thrones. The show at its heart is a medieval fantasy family drama, filled with palace intrigue, messy politics, and love affairs happening on the side. I wasn't particularly thrilled with all of that, because I think the show leaned too much on melodrama or even soap opera plotlines in the first 5 episodes, giving too much time on low stakes stories like various marriage pacts and Rhaenyra torturing Criston Cole with her teenage angst. But things improved quite a lot in the later parts of the season, and in the end I did quite enjoy it. I have already done a detailed review of the first 5 episodes, so I'm picking things up in the 6th episode. Before I go on, I must warn you that there will be spoilers. One of the most impressive things that happened in the first season was that King Viserys managed to stay alive from the horrifying skin-eating disease for more than 10 years. That dude is a beast. Rhaenyra didn't give a fuck about her marriage with Laenor Velaryon, and when we meet her after the time jump, she already has 3 kids with another guy. Laenor is too busy with his boyfriend to produce an heir, so Lord Harwin takes up the mantle, so to speak. Daemon is the all-around bad boy of the show. Within 1 season he has 3 wives, kills the first one, his second wife Laena, who has a couple of daughters with, commits suicide by dragonfire. Now that's a sentence you don't hear too often. Because during childbirth her baby is stuck, so she basically knows she's gonna die anyway, so why not go out with a bang? And Daemon ends up marrying Rhaenyra after quite smartly removing Laenor from the picture. Now the thing is, because of the time jumps, the show really starts to become interesting in episode 6. Now bear with me here, there are a ton of kids and new characters that emerge, but I will focus on only 3 of them: Aegon, Aemond and Lucerys. Aegon and Aemond are Alicent and King Viserys' kids. Aegon is a miserable rapist that doesn't want to do anything with the Iron Throne, while his brother Aemond very much wants to be king, but he's second in line for the succession, so it's not happening for him. But that does not stop him from trying to better himself by reading philosophy, poems, and practicing swordplay with Criston Cole. Of course, none of that is really the right way to learn about governing a kingdom, but I think lines like that bring to light Aemon's thirst for power and his overall ignorance about being a good ruler. Although I got to be honest here and say I kinda like Aemond. He's the right amount of badass that you almost feel for him. He's like a controlled psycho, someone that has impulse problems, but he's trying to control them. So, as it turns out, Aemond has an axe to grind against Rhaenyra's son, Lucerys. When they were young, after Laena's death, Aemond stole her dragon, and afterwards, during a fight with Laena's and Rhaenyra's kids, Lucerys had cut his eye out. It was more of an accident than something deliberate, but Aemond wants revenge. In this later part of the season, Alicent has endured 15 years of manipulative politics, and that has changed her significantly. She makes alliances with unsavory characters like Larry Strong, who for some reason has a feet fetish. Yeah, you can't have a Game of Thrones story without some weird sex stuff going on in the background. So Alicent wants the line of succession to change, so her son Aegon can become king. When Rhaenyra and Daemon find Viserys bedridden and barely able to speak, are justifiably worried and upset. Viserys is in so much pain that he regularly takes a strong painkiller that dulls his senses. And that's what Alicent is betting on, that he will be too incapacitated to intervene when she, acting as regent, changes the line of succession to her son Aegon. This episode was really good. Paddy Constantine gave a great performance as a dying old man that can barely walk. Viserys sees the danger of his succession going to ruin, so he decides to stop taking the drug, enduring the pain just long enough to reaffirm Rhaenyra as the next queen of Westeros. But the talk about Rhaenyra's kids being bastards isn't talk anymore. When Corlys Velarion's brother tries to intervene and loses his head in the process, whatever stability was there, it doesn't last long, because things really kick off when Viserys, in his dying bed, mistakes Alicent for Rhaenyra and starts talking about the prophecy of the prince that was promised, that an Aegon must be crowned king. But of course Alicent has no idea about the prophecy, so she just assumes Viserys is talking about their son, Aegon. That misunderstanding has tons of consequences that ultimately will lead young Aegon to the Iron Throne. One of the most bizarre scenes in the entire show is when Rhaenys outsmarts everyone and bursts out of the dragon pit and stands in front of the king and his entourage. She could have burned them all, but in the end she did nothing. Her justification was that she didn't want to start a war. But that feels a bit jarring because all the important people, the king, his family and his entourage, was right there. If she burned them all, she wouldn't just start a war, she would end it. When Rhaenyra and Daemon hear the news that Aegon has usurped the throne, they scramble to send emissaries to various lords to secure their support. Lucerys flies with his dragon to Lord Baratheon, but he finds one-eyed badass Aemon already there. Man, that scene when Lucerys lands and he sees that massive body of Aemon's dragon, I was like,
the fuck is this?
Aemon has made a much better offer to Lord Baratheon, so Lucerys leaves with empty hands, but not before Aemon seeks vengeance for his lost eye, and that leads him to bully Lucerys with his dragon. Of course, things don't really go to plan, and both of them lose control of their dragons, and Aemon's much bigger dragon just devours Lucerys, and the civil war that we will see in the next season kicks off with one giant angry bite. I really liked how the finale ends, with Rhaenyra receiving the news that her son died, and that changes everything for her. She was much more cautious and diplomatic up to that point. She didn't want to dive into war without having secured all her alliances first. But her son's death pushes her into war, and most likely she will become a much more fearsome and ruthless character than what we saw so far. Rhaenyra's character was not that particularly developed in the first part of the season, until episode 6, that is. Before that, we see a teenage princess that does whatever she wants, because her daddy is king. You have plotlines like Rhaenyra sneaking out of the castle and going out with Daemon to the brothels, having sex with Criston Cole. None of those events really mattered because nothing changed because of them. Rhaenyra was the favorite child of the king, and she remained to be so, despite all her teenage shenanigans. And that favoritism kept her safe from the political machinations that were happening in the background. All of Rhaenyra's actions in these first 5 episodes worked like a long setup. She didn't face any consequences for her actions because she was protected, and that kept her in a sort of teenage, irresponsible state for most of her life. But in episode 6, everything changes. Her father is dying, she has 3 bastard children, and if the truth comes out, she will not only lose the Iron Throne, but she might lose her life in the process. For Rhaenyra, this first season was all about growing up, leaving the child within her, and becoming an adult that must make decisions on her own. I think that's why in the final episode, she doesn't want her handmaidens to help her with the birth of her child. She knows the baby will die, and she wants that decision to be all on her. And that's good character development. It's a bit symbolic, but it works. She doesn't want to rely on someone else to bail her out of trouble, as we have often seen in the first season. Daemon is a fascinating character, and that comes more from the performance of Matt Smith and not so much from his character per se. We don't get scenes where he will explicitly tell us what he wants. We only get stoic looks from him and impulsive and often violent actions. When in the finale he presses Rhaenyra to attack, to start the war, and Rhaenyra is being cautious, he doesn't give a fuck. He grabs her by the throat in order to make her change her mind. And when she doesn't back down, he also doesn't give a fuck and doesn't apologize. A bad boy to the end. Although I think there was a massive subtext there that their relationship might be based on some degree of violence as foreplay. Criston Cole is the poor man in this first season. He falls in love with a princess, which she kinda rapes him and makes him go against the oath of celibacy that he gave to become a member of the Kingsguard. And when Rhaenyra dumps him, he becomes this scornful and bitter man that is out for revenge, even if it takes a lifetime to get it. and in his thirst for revenge, he becomes a plaything for Alicent, a spy and an instrument of violence for her. His bitterness really comes off when he messes with Lord Hardwin's kids, almost calling them bastards to their face. And finally, I think King Viserys was the most complete character in the first season. He starts off as a king that prefers more to drink, hunt, and have a laugh with his buddies than governing a kingdom. But when he did, he took a lot of brave decisions, namely putting Rhaenyra next in line for the throne. But in the end, I had to feel for the guy. During the dinner scene at episode 8, where he's in so much pain and he looks around the room, all his family, his grandkids, his nephews are all there, and all of them hate each other so much that the peace he spent building all his life is bound to not last long. That look of resignation on his face made the whole scene really special, like he was thinking, half of my family wants to kill everyone, and the other half wants to fuck it. What the hell did I do with my life? All in all, House of the Dragon is a special kind of beast. The narrative of stylized biography makes characters obey a line of events in the history of Fire and Blood, so we only get glimpses of who the characters really are, and those glimpses are spread thinly out throughout the season. It's an interesting way to tell a story, and I think it would work much better if we see more high-stakes storylines with war, tension, and good drama. And if things go as I think they will, then we will most likely see a bloody and fiery second season.